Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. Several new movies opened in theaters during the weekend that ended on May 26th, 2024, but like last week, only 2 of them managed to get into this weekend's top 5 movies at the domestic box office. And there was only a slight improvement in the total domestic box office earnings for this weekend's top 5 movies over last week. Back in April, there were 2 weekends in which the total domestic box office revenue for the top 5 movies at the domestic box office were below the $45 million that Ghostbusters Frozen Empire had earned during its opening weekend 9 weeks ago. Since then, it's been slowly going up, and this week's total is more than last week's by $1.3 million for a top 5 domestic box office total of $85.7 million. But before proceeding, I'd like to ask everyone to please like this video, please share the video on social media, please subscribe to support this channel, and please press the bell to receive notifications. Thanks! For this weekend, I'll first quickly go over the newest earnings for the current slate of highest-grossing movies worldwide for 2024. The highest-grossing movie so far, both domestically and worldwide, remains Dune Part 2, which appears to have ended its domestic theatrical run, but is still earning a small amount of money from overseas. Thus, its current domestic box office earnings remain unchanged at $282.1 million, but internationally the movie earned roughly another $1.2 million to bring its current international box office total up to $429.6 million. So globally, the movie has now grossed around $711.8 million, and it remains the only movie so far in 2024 to surpass both the $600 million and $700 million marks in worldwide box office revenue. With a production budget of $190 million, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0 respectively to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, as well as the additional costs of marketing the movie and other miscellaneous costs that the studio pays above and beyond the production budget, we get an estimated break-even point range of $475 million to $570 million. Thus, Dune Part 2 has most definitely made bank. The second highest grossing movie for 2024, both domestically and worldwide, remains Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. The movie earned another $1.1 million domestically to bring its current domestic box office total up to $195.5 million. But since there are no new international box office earnings currently being reported this weekend for the movie, its current international box office total remains unchanged at $369.3 million. Thus, its current global gross box office total rose to $564.8 million, which further secures the movie being the highest grossing movie of all time worldwide for the Godzilla and King Kong movies being produced by Legendary Pictures and Warner Brothers. With its reported production budget of $135 million, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0 respectively, we get an estimated break-even point ranging from $337.5 million to $405 million. Thus, Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire has also made bank. The third highest grossing movie so far this year, both domestically and globally, is Kung Fu Panda 4. The movie earned another $243,000 domestically to bring its current domestic box office total up to $193.3 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $5.4 million to bring its current international box office total up to $348 million. So globally, the movie earned another $6 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $541.2 million. The movie has a production budget of only $85 million, which, when multiplied by 2.5, we get an estimated mid-range break-even point of only $212.5 million. Thus, Kung Fu Panda 4 has also made bank. So this weekend's recap for the top 5 movies at the domestic box office will include 3 additional movies that are below the top 5 that I am continuing to track. Opening in the number 1 spot in this weekend's domestic box office was Warner Brothers' prequel spin-off movie Furiosa: The Mad Max Saga. The movie has a $168 million production budget, which, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0, we get an estimated break-even point range of $420 million to $504 million, which, as I had talked about in a video that I had released on May 26th, means that this movie needs to earn about as much as this year's second and third highest grossing movies have just to break even. And I had further explained in that video that in order for this movie to break even, it would likely need a domestic opening weekend box office somewhere in the neighborhood of $52.3 million to $83.7 million. Well, guess what? Furiosa, the Mad Max Saga, couldn't manage to do that because it only earned $25.6 million domestically. So not only is that far below what I said that this movie needed to earn this weekend in order to have a chance of breaking even, it's also far below what Box Office Pro was predicting for this movie's 3-day weekend earnings, $40 million to $50 million. Internationally, the movie earned $33.3 million to give it a global gross opening weekend box office of $58.9 million. So yes, Furiosa, the Mad Max Saga, is well on its way to becoming a huge flop, as I will explain in greater detail further into this video. Opening in a very close second place in this weekend's domestic box office was the Garfield Movie, which is an animated movie. Domestically, the movie opened by earning $24.8 million, but internationally it opened with a whopping $66.3 million to give the movie a global gross opening weekend box office of $91.1 million. With a moderately sized production budget of $60 million, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0 respectively, that gives us an estimated break-even point range of $150 million to $180 million. We'll examine this movie's potential for breaking even further into the video. Dropping into third place in this weekend's domestic box office was Paramount Pictures' animated/live-action fantasy comedy entitled If, starring Ryan Reynolds, Kaylee Fleming, and John Krasinski. Domestically, the movie earned another $16.1 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $58.7 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $20 million to bring its current international box office total up to $40 million. So globally, the movie earned another $43.7 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $98.7 million. With a reported moderately high production budget of $110 million, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0, we get an estimated break-even point range of $275 million to $330 million. We'll find out shortly what this movie's chances are of breaking even. Dropping to the number 4 spot in this weekend's domestic box office was Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which has a reported pricey production budget of $165 million. Domestically, the movie earned another $13.4 million to bring its current domestic box office total up to $122.8 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $35.7 million to bring its current international box office total up to $172 million. So globally, the movie earned another $57.3 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $294.8 million. With that $165 million production budget, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0, we get an estimated break-even point range of $412.5 million to $495 million. We'll come back later in the video to see whether this movie's chances of breaking even have changed. Dropping to number 5 in this weekend's domestic box office was Universal Pictures' movie The Fall Guy, which has a reported expensive production budget of $125 million. The movie earned another $5.9 million domestically to bring its current domestic box office total up to $72.2 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $7 million to bring its current international box office total up to $71.6 million. So globally, the movie earned another $16.3 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $143.8 million. But with that $125 million production budget, when multiplied by 2.5, we get an estimated mid-range break-even point of $312.5 million. We'll find out later in the video whether this movie can potentially break even or not. Dropping to the number 8 position in this weekend's domestic box office was MGM and Amazon Studios' movie Challengers, which has a reported moderately high production budget of $55 million. The movie earned another $1.4 million domestically to bring its current domestic box office total up to $46.5 million. Internationally, no new box office earnings were reported, so the movie's current international box office total remains at $35.1 million. So globally, the movie earned another $2.9 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $81.6 million. And with that $55 million production budget, when multiplied by 2.5, we get an estimated mid-range break-even point of $137.5 million. We'll be talking more about challengers shortly. Remaining in 14th place domestically this weekend was Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which earned another $370,000 to bring its current domestic box office total up to $112.6 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $539,000 to bring its current international box office total up to $87.5 million. So globally, the movie earned another $1 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $200.2 million, which makes Ghostbusters Frozen Empire only the 5th movie so far this year to break the $200 million mark globally. And that's this movie's only big accomplishment because it is a flop due to its reported production budget of $100 million, which, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0 respectively, yields an estimated break-even point ranging from $250 million to $300 million. Thus, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire currently has losses in the range of $49.8 million to $99.8 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that the production companies behind it, which include Sony and Columbia Pictures, currently stand to lose anywhere from $24.9 million to $49.9 million. Dropping to 15th place in this weekend's domestic box office is Alex Garland's dystopian action movie Civil War, with its moderately high production budget of $50 million. Domestically, the movie earned another $307,000 to bring its current domestic box office total up to $68 million. Internationally, the movie earned another $808,000 to bring its current international box office total up to $45.1 million. So globally, the movie earned another $1.6 million to bring its current global gross box office total up to $113.1 million. Given how meager this movie's box office was this weekend, I won't be projecting its earnings any longer, but with its $50 million production budget, when multiplied by 2.5 and 3.0 respectively, we get an estimated break-even point ranging from $125 million to $150 million. Thus, Civil War is a likely flop, with current losses ranging from $11.9 million to $36.9 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that A24 currently stands to lose anywhere from $5.9 million to $18.4 million. Going back to Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, given that there's only one movie in the franchise that currently has complete earnings data available, I will be using a range of possible average weekly draws from 30 to 40% to project what this movie's probable final domestic box office earnings might be. And when I do that, I can project that the final domestic box office for Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, will probably range from $63.9 million at the low end, $73 million at the mid-range, and $85 million at the upper end, which is well below what this movie needs to earn domestically to ensure that it can potentially break even. Using the movie's current domestic share of 43.42%, I can project that the movie's final global gross box office will probably range from $147.1 million at the low end, $168.1 million at the mid-range, and $195.8 million at the upper end. So not only was I wrong in the video that I released on May 26th about Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga probably being able to break $300 million globally, it looks like it won't even be able to break $200 million globally. And that's very pathetic indeed, meaning that the movie isn't just a small flop, it's a massive flop, with losses ranging from $224.2 million to $356.9 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that Warner Brothers stands to lose somewhere on the order of $112.1 million to $178.4 million. And guess what, folks? With losses that large, Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga is now the current biggest flop contender for 2024, because those possible losses are significantly higher than the losses amassed by Madame Web earlier this year. So congratulations to Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga! Going back to the Garfield movie, using a range of possible average weekly draws from 30 to 40%, I can project that the final domestic box office for the movie may range from $61.9 million at the low end, $70.8 million at the mid-range, and $82.4 million at the upper end. And using the movie's current domestic share of 27.2%, which is incredibly low due to the movie opening in some countries earlier this month, I can project that the final global gross box office for the movie may range from $227.7 million at the low end, $260.1 million at the mid-range, and $303.1 million at the upper end. So provided that this movie continues to maintain a high international box office, it shouldn't have any difficulty in breaking even. Going back to the movie that's entitled If, using a range of possible average weekly drops from 30 to 40%, I can project that the final domestic box office earnings for the movie may range from $96.1 million at the low end, $105 million at the mid-range, and $116.7 million at the upper end, which is slightly higher on the low end but also more narrow overall than last week's. And using the movie's current domestic share of 59.46%, which is lower than last week's, I can project that the movie's final global gross box office may range from $161.6 million at the low end, $176.5 million at the mid-range, and $196.3 million at the upper end, which is a higher and more narrow range overall than last week's. But that entire range still falls short of the movie's estimated break-even point range of $275 million to $330 million. Thus, the movie currently appears to be a box office flop and may lose somewhere on the order of $78.7 million to $168.4 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that Paramount Pictures currently stands to lose somewhere on the order of $39.4 million to $84.2 million. Going back to Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, this is the fourth movie in the franchise's current form that has an average weekly drop of 34.71% and a standard deviation of 3.65% to create a range of possible average weekly drops from 31.06% to 38.36%. And using that range, I can project that the final domestic box office earnings for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes may range from $158.3 million at the low end, $164.3 million at the mid-range, and $171.7 million at the upper end, which remains on par with what the previous movies in the franchise have earned domestically without taking inflation into account, but is an overall lower projection than last week's. The movie's current domestic share dropped slightly to 41.66%, but remains more than 2 standard deviations above the franchise's average domestic share of 32.29%, with a standard deviation of 4.55%. But by using that domestic share, I can project that the movie's final global gross box office revenue may range from $380.1 million at the low end, $394.5 million at the mid-range, and $412.2 million at the upper end, which is a reverse of what occurred last week when that projection made it appear that Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes could potentially break even, because this week's entire projected range has slid downwards to such an extent that it's now completely below the movie's mid-range break-even point and once again increases the probability that the movie is going to flop. So based on this week's projections and the movie's estimated break-even point range of $412.5 million to $495 million, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes currently stands to lose anywhere from $296,000 to $114.9 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that Disney and 20th Century Fox stand to potentially lose somewhere on the order of $148,000 to $57.5 million. Going back to The Fall Guy, using a possible range of average weekly drops from 30 to 40%, I can project that its final domestic box office revenue may range from $86.2 million at the low end, $89.5 million at the mid-range, and $93.8 million at the upper end, which is a more narrow projected range than last week's that is also slightly higher on the low end. But with its current domestic share of 50.21%, which is higher than last week's, I can project that the movie's final global gross box office revenue may range from $171.7 million at the low end, $178.2 million at the mid-range, and $186.9 million at the upper end, which is a more narrow range than last week's projection. So with its estimated mid-range break-even point of $312.5 million, as I calculated earlier in the video, the movie is a flop and stands to lose somewhere on the order of $125.6 million to $140.8 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that Universal Pictures stands to lose around $62.8 million to $70.4 million. And finally, going back to challengers, using a range of possible average weekly drops from 30 to 40%, I can project that its final domestic box office revenue may range from $51 million at the low end, $52.1 million at the mid-range, and $53.5 million at the upper end, which is more narrow than last week's projected range and slightly lower overall. With its current domestic share of 56.97%, which is slightly higher than last week's, I can project that its final global gross box office revenue may range from $89.6 million at the low end, $91.4 million at the mid-range, and $93.9 million at the upper end, which is also a more narrow range than last week's projection that is also slightly lower overall and strongly suggests that the movie won't break $100 million at the worldwide box office. So with its estimated mid-range break-even point of $137.5 million, the movie is a flop and stands to lose somewhere on the order of $43.6 million to $47.9 million in global gross box office revenue, which, when divided by 2 to account for the 50% of gross box office ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, means that its studios stand to lose around $21.8 million to $24 million. Thus, Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, joins the movies If, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, The Fall Guy, and Challengers as definite flops, while Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes once again becomes a probable flop along with the movie Civil War. But the Garfield movie is a probable success, while Dune Part 2, Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, and Kung Fu Panda 4 have all made bank. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.